Captain's log, stardate 41723.9. In response to a Starfleet order, we are in the Zende Sabu star system, having rendezvoused with a Ferengi vessel which has requested a meeting. Although we arrived here and made appropriate signals to the Ferengi 3 days ago, they have so far responded only with the message, "Stand by, Enterprise."
Hey everybody, welcome to the Pensky File. We are here with another episode of the Let's Watch series of Star Trek The Next Generation. We're on to episode 9 of season 1. It's called The Battle. It was directed by Rob Bowman, teleplay by Herbert Wright, and original story credit goes to Larry Forster. It originally aired way back in November 16th, 1987. So after a quick plot synopsis, we'll get into our thoughts. The Enterprise meets with a Ferengi vessel whose captain, Damon Bach, requests a meeting with Captain Picard. Picard, meanwhile, is suffering from persistent headaches and seeks the help of Dr. Beverly Crusher. She scans Picard but cannot find what is causing his headaches. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Wesley Crusher reports that a second vessel is approaching. Lieutenant Geordi LaForge identifies it as Federation Constellation-class starship. Bach and his first officer, Kazago, transport to the bridge of the Enterprise. He announces that the newly arrived ship is a gift for the hero of Maxia. After Picard fails to get the reference, Data reminds him that 9 years ago, at Maxia, Picard was attacked by an unidentified aggressor, which he destroyed. Bach angrily shouts that the ship in question was Ferengi. The ship is identified as the USS Stargazer, the ship that is approaching the Enterprise, that is, but it's Picard's former command. Bach explains that he found the ship as a derelict and offers it to Picard for free. Picard explains that at Maxia, the Stargazer was heavily damaged before Picard executed an action which would come to be known as the Picard Maneuver. Using warp drive, Picard ordered a short warp jump directly, resulting in the enemy vessel's light speed-based sensors briefly detecting the ship in 2 places at once and allowing Picard to win the battle. Due to the damage, the crew of the Stargazer abandoned the ship after the battle. Picard and an away team board the Stargazer, and he orders a chest of his belongings to be sent back to the Enterprise. Hidden in the chest is an orb, which glows brighter as Bach activates it, causing Picard to be hit by a wave of pain. Dr. Crusher orders him back to the Enterprise. Data, meanwhile, finds a discrepancy in the Stargazer's log, stating that the Ferengi were attacked under a flag of truce. Upon further investigation, Data and LaForge report to Commander William Riker that the logs were certainly faked. Dr. Crusher and Counselor Deanna Troi discuss the captain, and Wesley shows them unusual activity from the Ferengi ship. They head to inform Riker to alert him to the signals, who is informed by the Enterprise computer that Picard is transported to the Stargazer. Picard finds Bach waiting for him, and he has another orb. Bach explains that his son was in command of the Ferengi vessel at Maxia, and he came here seeking his revenge against Picard. He places the orb down and leaves Picard on the Stargazer bridge. The orb lights up once again, leaving Picard believing he is once again at the Battle of Maxia. On the Enterprise, Lieutenant Tasha Yar and Lieutenant Worf discover the orb brought over from the Stargazer in Picard's chest. They take it to Riker as the Stargazer powers up its weapon systems. Riker hails the Ferengi vessel and speaks to Kazago, who is suspicious at the sight of the orb, which is a banned device. He promises to investigate. Riker subsequently hails the Stargazer, but Picard continues to believe he's being attacked by the Enterprise. Knowing the Picard Maneuver is coming, Riker asks Data to devise a counter. Picard jumps the Stargazer to warp, executing the Picard Maneuver. Data, expecting the move, uses the Enterprise's tractor beam to deflect the real Stargazer, with such an impact that it throws Picard from his command chair. Picard tells Riker about the orb, who seems to understand, and fires his phaser at it, causing it to explode. After a few moments, Picard hails the Enterprise and requests a transport. Kazago hails Riker to inform him that Bach has been relieved of command for engaging in this unprofitable adventure. Alright, so that's the summary of the battle, episode 9 of season 1. Let's get into our thoughts right after this.
USS Stargazer. Constellation class, Starfleet Registry NCC 2893.
Alright, so the battle, episode 9 of season 1. I had a hard time rating what I thought about how I would rate this episode after I watched it and thought about it. I had to watch it twice. I watched it once a while ago. I haven't done one of these podcasts in a while. So I had to rewatch it again. So I watched it 2 times in a week probably to figure out what I wanted to talk about. And I guess before that, I'll say that I know I've been talking about my rating system previously here for the episode. It'll be 1 to 10. I think I'm going to change it to a 1 to 5 system. 5 being the best, 1 being worst. And I'm going to kind of do it in the way that Board Game Geek has its little rating system set up. So I'm just going to read them real quickly now. So 5 is the best, 1 is the worst. So 5 would be a classic episode. It would be one of the best. I would always watch it. 4 is above average. I'll usually watch it or recommend someone watches it. 3 is thoroughly average. It's probably enjoyable but unmemorable, and I would sometimes watch it. I'm thinking about this in terms of when I'm perusing through Netflix or Amazon Prime, which I would watch. 2 is a weak episode. I'll usually never watch it. 1 is bad, one of the clunkers, one of the worst, and I probably will never rewatch it. Obviously, outside of these rewatch episodes. So, as a recap, let's go through. I've got Encounter at Farpoint as a 2, which is weak. Naked Now is a 1. Code of Honor is 1. Those are both bad. Last Outpost is a 2, another weak episode. Where No One Has Gone Before is another 2. Lonely Among Us is a 1. That's one of the worst. And Justice is a 2.5, mostly just because it's enjoyable. So it's somewhere between weak and average. I had to throw a 0.5 in there. I'll try not to do that, but it felt appropriate for that episode. And The Battle, I've settled on a 2. It was going to maybe be a 2.5. I don't know if explaining this before getting to my breakdown of it is a good idea, but going in, so now you're aware of how torn I was when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to say about this episode. This episode does a lot for Picard's backstory. I think the Stargazer is supposed to be one of his big issues that is constantly referenced, besides what happens to him in Season 3, at the end of Season 3, which I guess spoilers don't really matter, but Best of Both Worlds, that arc, is probably the most memorable Picard emotional trauma event of his life. And he's got another one with his family, which comes up later. And I think the Stargazer is probably second in that list of 3 things. It's a well-known story. It comes very early in the series. It doesn't really explain a lot behind about Picard, but it does sort of just show his past and sort of fleshes out the character. And the return of the Stargazer is supposed to be impactful in this episode to Picard. So going through this, I guess what we're going to start with, I won't go through too much of the plot again, except to say that the Ferengi have returned. So this is the second appearance of the Ferengi since they last appeared in The Last Outpost. And the show is still trying to pitch them as enemies, although they're toned down in this episode. They're not nearly as obnoxious as they were in Code of Honor. Their sort of wild movement and gesticulating appearance has been toned down. They still talk kind of annoyingly, and they sort of goblin around. They're very goblin-y, but they are definitely toned down from the Last Outpost, which is a good thing. Show's still trying to turn them into an enemy, so they take Damon Bach, who is the father of the commander of the ship that Picard destroyed at Maxia, and he is seeking his revenge against Picard. And the plot of this episode suffers from... It's not very good. I think of this episode, I was going to rate it higher than a 2 just because of the amount of backstory that goes into it. Because it is kind of an important event. But I really can't give it a 2.5 with the plot is fairly strange. It's continuing the first season episode's problems where a solution is arrived at without much conflict or confrontation or anything like that. All of these very early episodes have situations that there's a problem as stated, they do something, and then they sort of easily get into a solution for it, which is something I've been noticing more and more as I go through. Everything sort of works itself out very neatly. There's not really a lot of mystery or intrigue or detective work that goes into it. It's minor. If any detective work is done, you don't focus on them actually solving it. You just sort of, the characters have a meeting and someone will come in and say that, oh, I found this and therefore this is fake. And they go, okay, moving on. And they move on to the next thing. And the episodes don't really have any dramatic rise or fall to how they go about themselves, which makes them seem very long and it makes them seem very boring. It's the biggest problem with the writing in the first season, I think, besides the characters being a little wonky at this point. But that's a combination of the acting and writing. From a sheer writing perspective, it's this dramatic arc problem that the show just can't get any sort of conflict going that makes sense or is interesting. So while they have these grand schemes of Picard being, the hero of this thing, and did he do it or did he not do it, they stumble in their execution about how they want to tell it. And I think in this case, this episode in particular struggles from... This script seems like it was written in a rush by 5 different people. and the credits don't go like that. But there's a lot of internal confusion to the logic here. The Picard maneuver alone seems to not make a whole lot of sense, unless I'm completely misunderstanding distances between the ships, and how fast something is moving at warp 9, which is apparently what they do. So they're close enough to be attacked, and then when they engage warp 9 for what seems like 3 seconds, they're suddenly right next to the ship, and you would think that the speed of light would be much farther than what this implies. So, I mean, this is really getting kind of nitpicky with the science of it, but the way that they go about explaining and that people are so confounded by this seems to make very little sense. And it's a general problem of what the script continues to do, where it's unclear to me. I know the Wikipedia thing that I just read said that it's Picard's first command. The episode sort of confuses it because when Picard introduces and explains at the start what he did at the Battle of Maxia, he says that he did it as a helmsman. So it seems to imply that he was a helmsman on the ship of the Stargazer. And my interpretation at that point would be that the captain had died, and he was the senior officer remaining on the bridge at that point, and he did this. But as it goes on and he starts having flashbacks, everyone's calling him captain, and he is sitting in the command chair for the entire, both the flashback and his reenactment at the end when he's under box mind control. So internally it doesn't really make any sense, and they're never very clear about how this actually worked out. I prefer the helmsman thing. That story, if he was like a lower ranking officer who suddenly took charge, it would make sense that would be his motivating event that sort of spurred his career. They don't make that clear, though. So the last bit of story, just looking through my notes here, that doesn't really make any sense is, what was the point in this episode of the Ferengi editing the logs of the Stargazer to imply that Picard had been responsible for attacking a defenseless Ferengi ship? It doesn't make any sense why they would do this, because they're already trying to mind control him. So there's no reason to... are they trying to ruin his reputation? It also doesn't make sense that the crew buys it hook, line, and sinker for a little while, considering that just a couple episodes previously, Wesley Crusher had made a device that perfectly mimicked Picard, and he was able to take over the Enterprise with it. So you think that this kind of technology is readily available and people seem to know about it, but there was no point for the Ferengi to do this. It didn't add anything. The episode's writing doesn't make it seem like it's a conflict between Picard trying to remember if he'd actually done this or not. That might have actually been a little bit more interesting if the memories that this thought maker machine were planting in were causing Picard to doubt whether or not he had done something. You've actually got a little bit of a story there, but instead they just kind of hint at it, they drop it. It doesn't amount to anything. The edited logs don't mean anything in the long term, and it basically becomes Spock trying to kill Picard by having him attack the Enterprise, and the Enterprise would defend itself and destroy the Stargazer. So it's a bunch of weak writing, scenes like that. It has this episode has a memorable Wesley Crusher scene, which would seem like it was written by someone who absolutely hates Wesley Crusher and was trying to write a perfectly hateable Wesley Crusher scene. It's the one where Wesley comes in where Troy and Crusher are talking about how weird the captain's acting and trying to get to it. And Wesley Crusher comes in and explains it. He was looking at some brain scans and he says, I quote, "I don't know much about brain scans," which is a great, smug, obnoxious line for him to say. And then he goes about explaining to these two what the issue is. He figures it out. He comes out of nowhere. He comes from stage left, basically, enters the scene by a Deus Ex Machina, and tells them exactly what's going on. They leave, and he gives a sort of sarcastic, like, "Well, you're welcome, ladies." And it is a epitomizing scene, I guess would be the word. It is the epitome of a terrible Wesley Crusher scene. This is the reason why his character is so disliked. He's so obnoxious, smug, and he is doing the work that the crew should be doing, but he's coming to it because he's a super genius, and instead of any sort of, earning the story plot points as we're going, we're instead being subjected to this. And the other minor thing, well, there's one of the this has one of the strangest scenes too in it. In the ready room, there's a scene where Riker, Geordi, and Data are just standing in Picard's ready room, which seems like a breach of privacy. Picard comes in. He's under control of the mind device. And then Crusher comes in. Crusher calls Riker number 1, which is something I'd never heard before. And Picard tells her he feels fine and why shouldn't he be in there when she's surprised to see him after his headaches. Overall, it's a very strange scene. I'm not doing justice explaining it's a scene why it's weird, but when you sit and watch that scene and you think about it, it combines all of these very odd things that are just thrown together in order to get the plot moving forward. It's just a sign of bad writing. Really rushed, really forced. And I guess one last thing. I think this is the first time that we hear the Enterprise computer talk, which is a nice thing. I don't think we've heard, I might be wrong. If I am wrong, let me know. But I think this is the first appearance of the computer Enterprise voice. Riker asks it something. He asks where Picard is, and the computer answers for him. So that's a nice little touch. They start to use that a bit more, which makes sense. You would think that the computer would be advanced enough to do it. If Siri can do it now, I'm sure that the Enterprise, who a computer is, can do it. And I think it's voiced by Majel Barrett, right? Does Roddenberry's wife, and she also plays Loxana Troy. So I'm pretty sure that's right. I might be way off, but I think I am 100% right on that, actually. So yeah, that's the battle. I'll give it a 2 out of 5. It is not... It feels like it should be a better episode. The execution is really sloppy. The execution holds it down from a 2.5 or a 3 even. I think I could have given it a 3 in terms of these season 1 episodes as to how far it's gone. So I thought it was an okay episode for how early it is, but it is definitely not good, which makes the ranking a little bit hard. And although it fills in a lot of Picard's backstory, the plotting is silly. The characters are silly. One general plot point you could get to is why... if some people show up and they say, here's the weapon you used to kill a bunch of my family or like a bunch of people I used to know, why don't you just have it for free as a present? You'd think that's a little bit suspicious, right? No one on the Enterprise seems to think that this is a weird thing that the Ferengi are doing, giving them back the Stargazer after they've all admitted that it was used to destroy a Ferengi ship. So it's weird stuff like that keeps this episode from the top. It's a 2 out of 5. And we'll be moving on to the next episodes. There's just so many season 1 episodes that we have to get through in order to get to anything decent. It's I apologize for these things not coming out regularly, but sometimes it's difficult to consider what I want to talk about when they're all kind of fading in together. Although Hiding Q, I think, is our next episode, and that is somewhat memorable at least. Q returns, and Q is one of the bright spots of this season. So thank you guys for listening. Let me know in the comments what you thought, what you think of the episode, all that good stuff. If you like the episode, please leave a like. And if you want to subscribe, whatever. You'll get these things sent to your YouTube front page, which they might get pushed down into the very bottom where they belong. But thank you guys for listening. I'm enjoying it, and it's been a lot of fun revisiting all these old episodes. Even if they aren't very good, it's funny to see how far we've come. And once we get to the second half of season 2, things pick up. But yeah, that was The Battle, episode 9 of season 1. I'll give it a 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5 is weak, and I will usually not rewatch. So thank you guys for listening. I will see you next time.